From QR code queens to hall pass fiends, we're getting into the Ultimatum finale and reunion. I think we successfully bullied Netflix into giving us both at the same time because this has never happened. This has never happened where we get to go into both simultaneously. Now, let me start with I can't think of another word that rhymes with QR code queen besides fiend, but I don't necessarily really think that JR is a fiend. I don't really love that word, but it was perfect for my word play, which I needed. So if you think of another word that rhymes with QR code queen, let me know. But the idea is JR wanted a hall pass because we finally see that montage. Now, as I'm sure we all did, I'm going to start with the finale episode, but I'm going to skip through it very quickly because what we really want to unpack is the reunion. So let's get into the couples. I'm not going to go in order. I'm just going to give a couple of thoughts on each of them and their choice day where they finally decide whether or their ultimatum day, I guess, where they finally decide whether they stay together or split apart. Let's start with Nick and Sandy. Now, Sandy met up with JR prior, and I think it's worth saying that if Sandy was interested in dating JR, I think that he would have left. And I think that he would have been like, bye, Zana. And I'm not even sure if he would have shown up to say his goodbyes to her. Like, to be honest, I think that his relationship with Sandy, he was open to whatever she was open to. So I guess I'm glad that she didn't want to be with him because, to be honest, I don't think that they're a match either, which we'll get into later. But she meets up with JR. I think it's clear that he would have gone for it if she was into it, but they didn't. And then she ends up meeting up with Nick. Now, when she meets up with Nick, Nick does this little fake out where it looks like he's about to propose. They're talking for a couple of minutes, and he goes to presumably grab a ring. But I guess instead he's grabbing a piece of paper that he had like a speech written on. If you want to know my thoughts, I think that Nick did that intentionally. I think that he wanted to see what Sandy's reaction was because after immediately he looks at her, he believes that she clenches up or has some sort of reaction which tells him that she was going to say no. And I think that he was literally testing her. I think this is something that he probably does to her often throughout their relationship, which I imagine was very toxic. I don't like how Nick acts like he wasn't really hard to deal with during this experience. I know that he was alone. I get that he was alone. I understand that Vanessa impacted his experience technically, but I would have left too. If I was Vanessa, I would have left immediately. So you're alone because of the consequences of your actions. You're here because of the consequences of your actions. You're dating someone younger than you. Like everything that Nick had going on. And then to find out too that before they got to this experience, Sandy felt like emotionally neglected by him. And then all of a sudden he's very intense. I just find him very unserious. Like I can't take him serious. I don't know that I believe that he really loved Sandy as much as I believe he loves the image that Sandy gave him, which is you get to look like you're not a super senior at sticking around the college campus when you've graduated 7 years ago. You are in LA, and I'm not to say that you can't be in LA past a certain age. I'm just sort of saying you're in LA, you want to leave, you don't want the temptation around you anymore. You've had your 15 years there, and yet you pick Sandy, who's literally in her prime, enjoys partying. I think that he's just, like I said, a very unserious individual. I think that he acted like he was interested in having this quirky relationship and have somebody finally see him because Sandy, as he described it, didn't love him for his creativity and he sometimes felt unseen. Be real. Be real. Nick is the type of guy to like faux spirituality, and he would go to like an ayahuasca retreat and claim that he was rejuvenated before he would actually do like 6 months of therapy one-on-one with a therapist. Like he needs to do a lot of reflection. I think he thinks he's one way and really is another way. I find him very manipulative. I find him very, I don't know what word to use. Maybe it's futile, but I think that being around him, he has such permeable energy. Like you can palpably feel what Nick is feeling by just taking one look at him. And I find that incredibly draining. In it, while he's talking to Sandy, he can't possibly understand, like I said, that he's been hard to deal with during this entire experience. On one hand, yes, I understand that she is housed above him. I understand that she's connecting with someone, but again, because he brought her there. I also think, if I'm being honest with you, if we look back at Nick having his emotional, whether you call it breakdown or emotional display on the couch when he was crying, now that we know that Sandy was living above him, I very much stand by my initial thoughts, which was that that was performative, that was manipulative, that was some sort of attempt to try to get Sandy back. He shows up with these large emotions to try to make somebody else feel guilted. And I think that because Sandy lives right above him, he's wailing down below with hopes that she will hear him and feel badly, if you want me to be very honest about it. So, yeah, I don't like that he's not accountable for himself. Granted, we found out that Mariah, the other person alone in this experience, was also calling Caleb. It's unclear if these two individuals have really insecure attachment styles and a lot of insecurities, or if they really would have been like this with or without them being left alone in their partnerships. I can't say for certain that Nick or Mariah would have been invested in their partnerships more than they would be invested in the journey of their ex, technically, whom they brought to this experience. So Nick gaslit Sandy. He tried to say, like, you obviously don't love me enough, after just like psyching her out with the engagement. Bye, Nick. Bye, Nick. I don't feel bad that she turned down the engagement. I think that her trying to appease to him and be like, I'm sorry, baby, 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 is a clear look inside of their relationship. If I'm honest, I think the two of them like to party together, and I think it's been toxic. And I think that she's used to seeing this behavior. And I think it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. Like, maybe she's not really sure if he's serious or not, but he's in a new relationship, and I'd be so curious to just know how old she is. Moving on to the next. So Nick and Sandy, that was a no. Moving on to JR and Zana. As mentioned, I do believe that JR would have gone with Sandy. If she was down, he was down. That's my opinion. But Zana just had, if there's one word, two words really, grace and patience. Zana could teach a master class on both. And I don't know how she does it, other than just being really within herself and grounded, knowing who she is, and through years of therapy. I could only just take note, because as I'm listening to JR talk, it was clear to me that he was letting her down easy and about to not, he wasn't going to do this. Like I said, another unserious individual. And I just had a conversation with my girlfriend, Amanda, and I want to bring this up because she was talking about it, and I hadn't thought of it prior until she said it. And it's such a great point. The way that JR treated Sandy and the way that JR treated Zana in this experience is completely different. JR treated Zana like she wasn't exhibiting wife qualities. How can you know that you're going to be a wife to me after all of these things, when it's very clear that not only is she emotionally intelligent, her heart is open, she's giving, she's ready to settle down, she's at that point. She froze her eggs, like she's serious about starting a family. So it's very obvious that Zana is wife material. And yet Sandy, the white woman who you were fetishizing, and it was fetishizing you are so quickly to give praise to when she says something like, oh, only people judge from the bottom. Really? That's it? That's it? Like the small things that Sandy was doing in the very minimal time that you knew her was enough for you to think that she was worthy of being a wife. It just feels like an interesting thing that for some reason he's capable of seeing Sandy as having wife-like qualities. And let me know in the comments, or let me know if you're watching or as you watch this back later, if you see any sort of correlation or if you sort of feel the same way. But I think that's an interesting sort of mentality that he has that's showing up right in front of us, whether it's an echo of some sort of misogynoir that he has. That's sort of what it seems like. His speech was bullshit. I mean, granted, Zana, I could tell she's very sincere. She's very genuine. I'm sure that she really did hate to see him upset. I'm an empath. I don't like to see him upset either. But then we see the montage one episode later, and it's like, you disrespected her so boldly, so boldly. On to Mariah and Caleb. I genuinely can't figure out how this couple got here, and I'm very curious. I'm very curious as to who applied them for the show. I understand that Mariah issued Caleb an ultimatum, but they don't seem like the type of couple who would just go on reality television. Neither of them. They seem like the type of couple where she would issue an ultimatum, he would have 6 months, and then if they didn't work things out, like they would break up privately. I genuinely look at the two of them and I can't figure out, and excuse me, because I'm just being honest. I'm in a period of really big honesty right now. I don't know if Mariah's here to promote her podcast that she already sort of launched on her page. I know she's going to be dropping like some sort of self-care or mental health podcast. I don't know if she came on this show just so that she could have some sort of platform, but I don't understand why her and Caleb were there. Neither of them were sincere with their experiences. Neither of them were really open to having a relationship. I found myself sort of believing that some advice that I was given, and I love my girlfriend. Shout out Janae, you were awesome on my episode. I initially was like, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe Caleb is just being nice. And I haven't seen that from men so much that it comes across as he liked her. But rewatching it, he was clearly presenting signs that he was interested in Arya. The way he was rubbing her hands, the willingness to do the things that she wanted to do for date night activities, the words that he was saying to her, and the reassurance, it's not something I look at and say is just platonic. And that he admitted that they had an emotional connection. So for you to not be honest about that and not be real about your experience, to the point where I would argue, as emotionally intelligent as I thought Caleb was the entire season, the lack of awareness for how this almost would feel like being gaslit to Arya, because she knows what she's experiencing. She knows the words that he's saying. She knows how the relationship is seeming in this experience. Now, I'm not going to act like there was a chance for Caleb to walk away with Arya, because I do believe he was going to go back to Mariah. But my issue is the transparency on the feelings he was having, and also just being real towards Mariah. I think that he was very attracted to Arya, number one, because she's beautiful. But number two, I think he also just loved Arya's independence and self-assurement. Like, Arya didn't need the constant reassurance and validation that Mariah needed. And again, it may be unfair of me to judge, so I'll acknowledge that Mariah was alone in this experience. We don't know how she would have acted if she wasn't. But I personally, my opinion, feel like Mariah would have called Caleb and tried to talk for 2 hours regardless, especially after seeing her interaction with Micah, which she really didn't seem like she was desiring to have any sort of connection or even like companionship there. So they come across as fake. I don't understand why they came here, how they got here. Thank you, Toya, for agreeing that they came across as fake. It didn't seem genuine to me. Also to find out, and this is again, Scotty tries to gaslight Arya. Mariah tries to gaslight Arya. Caleb tries to gaslight Arya. I've seen this like sentiment echoed online, sort of implying that like Arya came too hard at Caleb, or like Arya was getting over issues with Scotty. No, Caleb, to be clear, Arya, I wish you'd just share the receipts, but I understand that you're being completely respectful. But it's not just that he was liking her stories. What were those stories? What posts was he watching? It was clearly enough to notice for a full week and a half. If you're sitting here and watching this video and you've ever had someone that you thought liked you or was constantly watching your shit, first person to watch it, first person to like it, don't judge her. Like, okay, like everybody's trying to act like she's just kind of insane. And I get where she's coming from. And to hear that Mariah hadn't heard about that, well, like, I wonder why. I wonder why you haven't heard about that, because that's not a conversation, again, that Caleb wants to have with her. Caleb even controlled the conversation that Mariah had with Arya at girls' night, which I personally found inappropriate, because Mariah was able to say to Sandy, Nick's not marriage material, unprompted, and just like kind of be honest about the experience, while Arya, who does not owe loyalty to Mariah, has to hold herself back and not be real about things. I don't like it. To be honest, I wish them well. But after watching the reunion and watching the finale, it's like I liked them a lot more earlier in the season. I completely have been there, and I don't think it's fair to put a woman down for being insecure. But I do need to say that Mariah seems just a little bit like too serious for me. Like she seems she's very young. I remember being her age and thinking that I'm already off my timeline and needing to get married quickly. And also, oh my God, someone loves me. Nobody else may ever love me like this. I better lock it down. But it just seems to me like she's moving out of fear versus moving out of confidence. And like she's reassured herself is the opposite. What is their age gap as well? Is it 4 years? Is he 20? Is she 24? He's 28. I know they're in their 20s. I know it's not significant, but I do just wonder about that. On to Arya and Scotty. Oh, I'm sorry. Mariah and Caleb got engaged. They got engaged. Oh my gosh. Thank you for checking in while you're at work. Mariah and Caleb got engaged. Like I said, I think that Mariah is in love with the idea of being married. I'm curious to see how things go with Caleb. They seem to have a couple of moments where they had a lack of communication styles, even though they are so similar in being soft-spoken. Again, wish them well. Arya and Scotty, Arya didn't want to say yes. Point blank, period. That's the point. She didn't want to say yes. She was terrified. I don't know how long the actual pause was between her saying yes and him asking, but I felt it in the moment. Again, empath checking in, you can sort of feel emotions through the screen. I was like, this is resistance. This is you digging your claws into, is this a good idea? And I personally am relieved that 24 hours later, she broke it off. Like, thank God. Thank God. Because if we're being real, Scotty wasn't showing any sign of being close to getting married, despite being the person who issued the ultimatum. Summer 2026, when they got engaged in 2023, they're not getting married, in my opinion. That's a valid point as well. It sort of feels like the Bachelor franchise, or the weddings are planned so far out. If the show was filmed last year, again, it's a long time. It's a gap. And I wonder if that's partially on Caleb, who feels like this is moving too fast to give Mariah space to potentially change her mind, which is, again, sort of just like not being real with your partner. Let's get into the reunion. Both of the couples were invited, and one couple accepted and the other didn't. I was going to say allegedly, but we now know, after I watched Chanel and Micah's live last night that they did with Dave and Vanessa, that they did opt to not come to the reunion. And we now know the reasons. I'll get into that at the end of the video. The shut up ring. I've heard that phrase used before, and I guess it's like self-explanatory, but I would hope it's not, but it feels mean for me to say it is, but it probably is. They seemed happily engaged. Caleb and Mariah, we check in on them at the beginning. They seem happily engaged. And then we find out Arya's like, nope, I just want to say, as you guys are giving fake, like, you know, we can sit here and we can talk about your experience. That's the thing. Mariah and Caleb aren't real about sharing the downsides of things too. Like, honestly, the first year of it being engaged is bliss, but it's also like learning to be with someone in that close proximity, starting to have the stress of planning a wedding and having people ask you about things. You were also on TV. So Arya's like, no, you called Caleb every single night on the phone for 2 hours. And then she was like, and Caleb whatever you're projecting as being completely happy in your relationship, that's fake because you're still lurking on my stories until you blocked me after a week and a half of liking them, liking my posts. And then we got no explanation. If the editors edited that out, screw you. If it wasn't gone over, screw them. Why can't we know the details? What kind of photos? Did he say anything? Like, I'm so curious about that. Caleb then admits that there is an emotional connection. Mariah gets pretty pissed. Like, she's like, I fucking knew it. I watched it back. I knew you weren't being honest. And it's like, on one hand, I fault Caleb for not being honest. On another hand, I'm sure that he has a fear of how Mariah will take things because of her fear of abandonment and kind of having to really prioritize her emotions. He even, like I said, wanted to control how Arya expressed things to Mariah just to sort of protect her. I think that's draining. I think that's going to drain Caleb. I really, really do. But he admits that they had an emotional connection. Then we check in with Arya and Scotty. We find out they're not engaged anymore. Thank God. Thank God. A clap came out of me. She realized 24 hours later, this was a huge mistake. And basically, they tried to work on things after they broke off the engagement. They tried living together. They wanted to do couples therapy, and they still ended up going into the same style of conflict they were having before, which doesn't surprise me because Scotty seems like a very rigid person to me. Scotty seems like it's hard for him to make compromise and to make change, which is why it was kind of shocking to hear that he ultimately moved to San Francisco for Arya. And I'm sure that he did so begrudgingly, to say the very least. I'm sure it wasn't something he was happy about. I'm sure it was something that he constantly admitted, or he was just in a bad mood for being there, if you want to know my opinion on the relationship. She wants to do couples therapy, and an entire year goes by and he's not willing. Nothing pisses me off more than when somebody in a relationship acts like they're going to do something to progress the relationship and then acts surprised when nothing's happened and then things are ended. It's kind of interesting to me how men will just stay in relationships, and how it really seems as I get older, more likely that the women are the ones to walk away and say, I'm unhappy. Because who knows if Scotty's unhappy? He was probably miserable being in San Francisco. He probably makes himself miserable, but he's going to stay there. Women more inclined to walk away. She felt like she was nagging him to the point where it was hard to watch Arya get so emotional on the stage, because I'm sure that she felt like this in their relationship. It's such a simple thing. It will take you an hour once you get there. Why can't we go and do this? Like, we were just on a reality television show. We obviously need therapy anyways. And then he tried to act like on stage. And this is what I mean when I say multiple people gaslit Arya on her experience. Well, we did go to therapy. You went to therapy when? A year later. A year later, you went to therapy. A year asking wasn't enough. But a year later, as she's at her wit's end and feeling completely alone and beside herself while dealing with, and trigger warning for pregnancy loss, the loss of their child. So she's processing a miscarriage. She's processing the loss of her grandma. And, now you're available when you could have been a better support to her through that, had you agreed to go to couples therapy from the very beginning. Like, it's just, and again, Scotty was the one who issued the ultimatum and professes to being ready, to being married. And thank you, Toya. He begged her to marry him and refused to do counseling. He wanted to be married so badly, but refused to do things that married couples do. Like, the idea that premarital counseling is optional, or if you're in a bad space and isn't just like, woo, like we should be like premarital counseling. Everybody needs to go to premarital counseling. Go to premarital counseling. Go to premarital counseling. Like, couples need to talk. Go to couples therapy. If you start arguing with your spouse, go to couples therapy if you're able to. The resources exist because people are so rigid in their ways that they're unlikely to change unless they understand why they're like that, which you would need a therapist for. So that's really frustrating to me. It's really frustrating that Arya had to suffer that loss and also just handle, like I said, the weight of it by herself, because we've seen Scotty's capacity when he's, he said his favorite thing to do was be vulnerable, and yet we saw very little of that throughout this entire experience. And I'm convinced as well that the timing of when he went to couples therapy it's giving Tom Sandoval what he did to Ariana. Like, you went to therapy, or who just did this as well? On Love is Blind, Monica and whatever whatever that guy's name was, Steven, when he went to therapy or he did something just so he could bring it up at the reunion, you opted to be interested in therapy so that you could say that we went to therapy, not because you had any interest in repairing our relationship or showing up differently for me. So that's, and I'm sorry. Scotty made a comment that I put in quotes because it was important to me that I repeated it back verbatim. He said that it was demoralized. He felt demoralized. Poor me. It's demoralizing to give everything and not be enough. And by give everything, we mean nothing. And by give everything, we mean what? Any answer, Scotty? No. Okay. What are we giving? We're giving procrastination. We're giving manipulative. I don't know what you were giving to her. Next, we go to, Zana chimes in, which I appreciate. I've mentioned this on my TikTok. Zana chimes in and says that she was surprised that Arya said yes, but from her knowing Scotty and how he reacts, she felt like it was knowing that his fear of rejection would make him feel abandoned. And so she didn't want to reject him. She didn't want to make him feel that way. And yeah, Arya's pretty much like, that's exactly what was going on. That's exactly how I was feeling. And again, poor me, Scotty says, because she broke my heart, shattered it. You broken into her, you shattered into pieces. Wah, wah, wah. If I had a video editor, I would put that song in right now. So just imagine that it's in. And imagine someday when I have more followers that there's production. Zana says that she was happy that her and JR are sitting on polar sides of the couch. And he was like, and I was like, immediately giggles from me. I love when a woman can be petty. I love when a woman can say a comment, because he's been Prince Petty the entire time. Prince Hall Pass, Prince Petty. What? So they're on polar sides of the opposite. They broke up and then they moved out in separate apartments across the street. And I'm dead, because when they say across the street, they mean across the street, because I saw a picture of Xana's apartment and her window, and it's the exact same window that JR has. So I'm like, you guys may genuinely live in the same building. Like, it sort of reminds me of last season of Love is Blind, where we found out that Tyler lived across the hall from Bri. Like, okay, so you still want to be close to her. But anyways, they're still friends. We find out that JR has supported her with her egg freezing, which, I'm not going to complain against that. I think it's good that he's being supportive for her. In this process, he disrespected her like no other. Like no other. Okay, so we find out they move into opposite apartments. JR tries to frame it like Zana wanted to ignore our experience and start dating again and have things go back to being normal. And I'm like, not you trying to make her look bad. And Zana interjects and she's like, that's actually not how things went, because he said they didn't spend Christmas together. They did spend Christmas together. I guess the caveat is that they didn't get each other gifts, which now means if you don't bring a gift, you didn't spend Christmas together. They spent Thanksgiving together. Then he bought her a gift 3 days later because she got him a gift. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm so glad Zana can look at herself now and say, I see things clearly. I can see clearly now. JR is gone. I don't know. See things clearly, because a gift 3 days later and then to find out he canceled on her birthday. I was sick. Okay. Mask on. Come mask on. What, JR? Not really, but you're sick. You're sick. I don't buy that for a second. So Zana says that JR felt like a con artist and that her and Nick did speak, and both of them were of the impression that Sandy and JR bumped knuckles. Is it bumped knuckles or bumped elbows? Let me know. But they got freaky with each other. They both thought. But then Sandy was like, Nick, don't even try it. You already know that we didn't. I do think that if Sandy is this adamant about it, I don't think they did. I'm going to be honest. I don't think they did. And I don't think they did mainly because I think Sandy knew that Nick was going to spiral during this experience. But I don't necessarily think she would have gone that far. I'm going to be honest. JR, yes, he's talking about cameras in the bedroom. I don't really think Sandy would have gone that far, knowing who she's partnered with and knowing how Nick would have reacted. That's my personal opinion. I'll say this, though. I was shocked that they didn't meet up with each other. Shocked. You mean to tell me you both live in LA and nobody met up? That's shocking. That was dispelled. I saw that and it was zoomed in and it was him with his shorts on. I thought that too. When I watched it. I was like, I thought that he was in the nude in one of the episodes as well. In fact, if you go to Sandy's TikTok, she posts the exact clip of him in the bedroom and she shows what, like, the actual scene and zooms in, and it's very clear that he's in shorts. But it's also not our fault because they edited that to seem like that. And also in the trailer, it was so fast. They tried to pin that moment off like it was Arya and Caleb. So not our faults. When we've, like, again, this, I already mentioned this, but we found out that Nick lived directly below JR and Sandy. That was definitely intentional from the producers. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I also, call me a conspiracy theorist. I have no idea. I wouldn't say I am, but Nick crying on the couch, the way that he cried on the couch was so that Sandy could hear him. And I also wondered, like, would you not be tempted to do a little extra couple steps? Like, I don't know. That's just such a funny position. If you're feeling extra petty and you're getting too many texts, like stomp on the floor. I can't say that I wouldn't be tempted to do that if I was in my toxic and unhealed states and we're all on our journeys. Zana thinks that JR tried to ruin her trial marriage by implying that she was the one who told JR that Scotty was talking shit about him. Meanwhile, we find out it was Arya. And after seeing the montage that we see that I'm going to get into in a couple of minutes, of course she thinks that. He's talking about how he can get her pregnant. Like, of course she's of the impression that he's here for a hall pass. I also, when they played that montage, I swear, and like, I don't think this was the edit for once. I think that Nick was literally across from JR when he said, I'm here for a hall pass. I don't know if he was talking to Vanessa or if he was talking to Sandy, but if somebody could find that episode and put it in the comments, I'd be so grateful. But I swear it's from the reunion, whatever the timestamp is. They show Nick is sitting right there. So he heard that comment. It wasn't just to whoever JR was talking to. I want to comment. Yes, I think JR tried to do that, but I think he tried to do that specifically to Scotty. One, to mess with Zana, which is foul. Additionally, because I think he knew that Scotty would be upset by that. And I think that if Scotty had different reactions, that wouldn't have ruined their trial marriage. It shouldn't have ruined their trial marriage. So what if she was? So what if she was? And Scotty, JR was presenting that way. So why not just be like, I didn't say it, but I guess I'll say it now. Yeah. I mean, multiple people think it. It's not just me. Then we get into the QR code nail with receipts. I don't really remember what these receipts were of, but all I remember is the nail, and that was iconic. The nail was iconic. QR code nail. I thought she literally took JR's SIM card at first and glued it to her nail. That's what I thought her nail tech did. I was like, not him missing his SIM card this whole time. That's what I thought was happening. So Vanessa and Dave come out, and she shares that Nick lied about his homeschooling experience. She also says that she didn't feel like she needed to say goodbye to Nick. I'm not sure if that's accurate or if they edited that. In a TikTok, she says that Nick was completely aware that she was leaving, that she had texted him, she had told him that she was leaving, and that his behavior was why she was leaving, or at least a huge part of it. So I don't know if I believe that. I also don't think that Nick deserved a goodbye. For what? For what? And this is why people would hate to see me on reality TV. You wouldn't get a goodbye from me. You wouldn't get a goodbye, and I might steal that painting you made. That's the goodbye. Bye. Your painting's gone. That's your goodbye. Not Caleb. Micah took his book back from Mariah, and I'll take that. I know you were reading it. That was a little cruel, but that was, to me, that was kind of funny. I think we need to take things lightly sometimes. So we didn't really get into the, Vanessa saying that Nick was allegedly having issues with substance abuse during this, and also that he lied about his psych evaluation. But that's not surprising, because that would negatively impact Netflix. But that is part of the allegations. Vanessa does say that he was struggling with substance abuse issues, allegedly, during their experience. And Nick all but confirms that when he says, I was drinking and self-medicating. He tells Sandy, I tried to get in between you guys from day one. He said all of my darkness was directed at Sandy. She was bombarded with aggressive energy from me. Why the fuck would Vanessa stay? Why would Sandy stay? It sounds, in my opinion, like an abusive situation. I don't like it. I don't like it. Now, I think that Sandy is worked up over Nick. I think she was crying at some point, and I was like, why are you crying about JR and Zana's experience? Because really, you can miss me with that. Although I do understand her feeling objectified, but she was simultaneously objectifying him. So that's a gray area. But I think that she was mostly emotional over the fact that Nick was tormenting her for the last year. You are late, but I'm going to be wrapped in a few minutes. And when I'm wrapped, you'll be able to watch from the beginning. I'm at the part where I'm talking about how Sandy was crying at the reunion because we found out that Nick has been tormenting her for the last year. And I'd like to know how long Nick has been in this relationship, and if his girlfriend was aware prior that he was allegedly tormenting Sandy. And I'm just interested how often he was trying to contact her, because he tries to present like he's, happy and in a new relationship. But I think she says he tried to infiltrate daily infiltration. Nick's response, though, don't worry. He had a great response. You got to be careful when you fall in love with an artist. Give me a break. Give me a break. And it's funny because I thought they would show this, but we find out that Nick was going skateboarding in one scene. He says this on his Instagram or something, that he went skateboarding in one scene and was skateboarding outside for a while, ate shit. That's when he had the alleged or presumable black eye that he had. And he also broke his toe. So I don't know if it's you being an artist so much as you being very erratic, to be honest. What do you think about the people defending Nick so much and bashing Vanessa? I mean, listen, I think Vanessa has one of those personalities that people don't like. I think people don't like that Vanessa is quirky. Vanessa is outgoing. She isn't a personality that everybody would get along with. She is eccentric, but Vanessa is not wrong for leaving Nick. It's so easy for women to just be like, well, she annoys me, so I don't like her. What does she owe them? And to be clear, because I almost made a TikTok about this and I was like, Leah, calm down. You're getting worked up over reality TV again. Chanel, Micah, Dave, Vanessa, none of them owe any of us an explanation as to why they would want to leave. This is a circumstance where you're living with another person. And if that person makes you uncomfortable in a way that you question your safety, I think you should be able to leave. Like, I think if you feel, or even if you feel so uncomfortable that you can't have a sense of normalcy because this person is in your space, sure, you in theory know what you signed up for, but unless you did a test run and went and roomed with someone for 6 weeks or 4 weeks, I don't think you really know. Like, I don't think people really know what it's like to be in the experience. And yes, I could selfishly say, you know, Chanel and Micah, like they shouldn't have been here anyways. Like, they were really interested in each other. You know, you win some, you lose some. I'm not going to say that somebody should stay in a situation where they're uncomfortable. I think that on Perfect Match and Too Hot to Handle, those shows, for example, it's weird as fuck when they have to sleep in the same bedroom as each other when they don't know them immediately. And I often wonder about if that's safe. So, okay, note the montage of JR that we saw confirmed that he was very much here for lust reasons. It confirmed that he was here for a hall pass. Just to go through a couple of the things, I think he said, I like BJs. I'm here for a hall pass. He said to Arya, I might get you pregnant. No cameras in the bedroom. He talked about watching earlier seasons and his favorites being Zay and Jake, and he wants to have an experience like that. Arya got to the point where she said, I'm okay with cuddling, but I don't want to have sex with you. So, JR, you were moving grimy, you were moving despicable, which brings me to a question. If you go on this show, is it a hall pass? Is it a hall pass? I'm curious. I said I would end with this. Chanel did a TikTok video. Go check it out. She explained the full reason as to why her and Micah left. The too long didn't read is basically she felt uncomfortable. She felt uncomfortable and like she was being prompted to do things, I'm assuming by production, that she did not want to do, and they were not framed or feeling like they were optional. Now, once she actually was in the process of leaving and the producers knew that they were leaving, she was told that these things that she was asked to do were optional and she didn't have to do them. But being asked to do them, they didn't feel optional. And she said that she found herself giving into these things and feeling really badly about herself and like she wasn't being herself. Then her and Micah tried to push through it a little longer. He shared the same sentiment. He also felt like he was being prompted to do things that were just unnatural and didn't make him feel right. And they tried to push through it. Then they have a conversation with Vanessa. In this conversation, they find out what's really happening with her behind closed doors. And it's at that moment that they say, no, This is over. She said in her video, there was no intervention, no accommodations made to help Vanessa. And if that can happen to Vanessa, then that can happen to anybody. And as far as those being their reasons, which is because really they sound like a lack of care from production, going to the reunion to talk about why they left would be disingenuous because they wouldn't be able to freely speak upon the reasons that they left. Now, granted, go check out the video so that you can hear from her. That's my simplified version of why they left. And like I said, I would leave. I would leave. And again, is it an ultimatum? I think if you are serious about your relationship, you should never, ever go on a show like this. Is an ultimatum a hall pass? You would think your partner would not do that. This is Netflix. Like, tell me what you think in the comments. That's all of my thoughts. Oh, Scotty didn't get nearly enough accountability. We should have been able to find out about why he was pressed about Zana winning beer pong, why he was adamant about being ageist towards her and telling her to hang up her drama jersey. I would have liked to go into detail about that. Really just like be real with Scotty. Really just be real with Scotty. I feel like Zana got to address JR. I really feel like she didn't get to go into her experience that she had with Scotty. Any other parting thoughts that I have? Oh, the Lachey's wanted to carry Dave and Vanessa out of there when he brought up the smelly farts. Like the way that the Lachey's wanted them to exit to the left immediately when he did that. And I'm like, why are we on this? Why are we on this? I'll end with that. Put all of your thoughts about the reunion. Put things that you feel like we missed. I think I'm going to be going live later this week with Storytime with Ricky so that we can talk about it. Zana did an interview with Nick Viles that I think we're going to recap. And I know Arya's interview with Nick Viles is dropping later today. So hopefully I can recap them. I want to interview them myself, but I haven't gotten anywhere with that. But just know that I'm trying. Not on their end. I'm waiting for higher ups to get back to me, but hopefully I can bring that through for you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Happy December 19th. Bye.